Diego Uribe.
Can we move the podium a little bit? Can you hear me okay? Yes. And can we move the podium? Please. So before you start timing my time or discounting my time, the disclaimer is that Peter should have got this spot because I'm going to take you to lunch and you would have primed us better than me. You opened the appetite. Okay, so I'm going to be speaking about harnessing dynamic balance for a better world. And if this concept of dynamic balance can make the world a better place, I think it's very appropriate that we start with just a clear-cut definition. And borrowing from systems thinking, and this is a very simplified definition, dynamic balance is a state of equilibrium that emerges from the interaction between two or more dynamics. And what I want you to hold in your mind as I go through from this definition is basically the word equilibrium. So when we think about equilibrium, immediately we have that image of sustaining something. And it's not just any kind of equilibrium, but it emerges from dynamics that are constantly negotiating between themselves. And that negotiation is what brings a sustainable condition. So let me give you a little bit more background of where I got interested in this stuff. So at a very young age, I was very fortunate to come across, I think, a very enlightened book that it's called The Web of Life. Who has heard about this author, Friedhof Capra? Yeah, Tao physics, exactly. And to me, he was a very enlightened thinker and way ahead of the time. So in this Web of Life, he describes in the first few chapters what he calls the Gaia Theory. And the Gaia Theory is this Earth view, or the view of the Earth, as only one integrated system. So everything that was on the Earth, life and non-life, contributed to the system. And as in describing the system, he described three concepts that to me are very important. They're going to be central to what I'm going to be talking to you today. One is self-organization, meaning that everything in the system contributes, and not only the variables, but the dynamics within the system contribute to its structure, to its core dynamics. So it's emergent and it's determined from within. Then, most important, and the thing that I want you to keep in mind is self-regulation. So the system has mechanisms, feedback loops, that allows it to shift to a different direction. And in this case, in the Gaia Theory, the direction and the purpose of the systems is always restoring balance, always coming back to a balanced state. And then third is fractality, or fractals. And fractality is this property in which patterns, structures, and dynamics, the same structure, pattern, and dynamics manifest at every scale of resolution from very microscopic to very macroscopic. So I'm going to be coming back to this concepts as I go through. And when I was like 14 or 15, I was really jazzed by this very elaborate thinking, and then I went into my own dark ages and I forgot about all this stuff. Actually, so I got interested in things that were appropriate for that time, like beer, hanging out, and but then later in my life, and when I became a student of the creative phenomenon, when I became a scholar of creativity and a creativity specialist and practitioner, dynamic balance was brought back to me. And I found dynamic balance at the core of the creative process. And I found that what being held in dynamic balance were two opposite yet complementary modes of thinking. On one hand, divergent thinking, which we can think it's this very expansive mode of thinking where we think about many different and novel alternatives. And on the other hand, convergent thinking, which is this contractive mode of thinking, focused, okay, where we screen, select, and refine options. And I found out that creativity could only emerge as we held these two opposite yet complementary modes of thinking in balance. And if we overemphasize one, let's say if we overemphasize divergent thinking, the only thing that I got was weirdness. And if I overemphasize convergent thinking, the only thing that I got was more of the same, the obvious. So it was only in the pulse between the two that true novelty that's useful could emerge. And if we think about this a little bit more, this is the same as Darwinian evolution, actually. If we think about this is the same dynamic, so where nature creates many different experiments, so divergent mode, and then follows a pulse of convergent where it screens for the fittest and moves forward, and this is opening and closing. And then in studying the creative phenomena a little bit deeper, I realized that dynamic balance was not only at the core of the creative process, but was everywhere in creativity. And balance was being held between individual creative effort and group creative effort, between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, between work and play, between active creative engagement, like working deliberately, and then passive creative engagement, which is incubation and letting the unconscious work, and so forth. So I saw that dynamic balance was really everywhere in the creative process. And then thinking more about this, said, yeah, of course. Many civilizations have recognized that. We see dynamic balance everywhere, and we see symbols of dynamic balance every day, such as the Star of David, the yin and yang, the mandalas, and the infinity. Who has seen the symbols before? Okay, this has been recognized. Show of hands, good. So flash forward 21st century. I'm going to present to you now 3 systems at different scales of resolution, and we're going to talk a little bit about them. So here, on my far, or on your left, it's my computer hard drive. And the one thing that I want you to notice is that we have here 120 gigs, and I have only 1 gig left. Okay, and anecdotally, I can still picture myself at the Apple store back in 2007 buying my computer, and then my guy's saying, hey, do you want the 250 gigs? And I was making a quantum leap from a 40 gig computer, saying, I don't see myself filling this up. No, 120 is perfect. Boy, I was wrong. Then this is pretty obvious, home storage, and I don't think I have to explain much of what's happening here. And this is the economy, and represented by a skyrocketing chart. So my question to you is, what's the commonality between these scenarios? Any guesses? Too much? Chaos? Okay, I'm just going to give it away, but these are all systems that have followed a path of uncontrolled growth at the verge of collapse, and that soon, in Gaia Theory, we will experience an extreme regulatory episode. So in the case of my computer hard drive, I will have to buy a new computer, buy an external hard drive, which is going to be extreme for my pocket, and then I'm going to have to put a lot of time torn apart between which movies, which music, which files I'm going to have to erase to make some space. In the case of my home storage, pretty obvious. I'm going to open it up, it's going to crash over my head, I'm going to get injured, and again, I'm going to have to sort time. I'm going to have to use part of my time to sort out through stuff and get it out. And in the case of the economy, I'm not going to elaborate because we all know what happened very recently. So the question is here, why do we hold growth and expansion so dearly and as such a fundamental value of our society? And I have debated this with friends, family, and of course this is not easy to answer actually. But because here at TED we take risk, I'm going to elaborate a hypothesis for this. And my hypothesis is that we have been culturally hijacked by a very pervasive meme that was crafted at the highest level of abstraction. And this is, we were told that we live in an expansive universe, okay? And expansion dwells deep in our collective unconscious. And we have all seen this picture of the universe, this metaphor, this balloon with the dots, and the dots getting bigger and farther apart. And that looks like our house is an urban sprawl, actually. And we've all been told this. So if this is true, if this is the core dynamic of the universe, then with the fractality comes into play here, because if this is the core, well, this dynamic should manifest at every scale of resolution. So we think about our lives, and our lives is about expanding and growing our assets, expanding and growing our careers. And then we think about nations, and nations is all about what? Expansion and growing. And if we don't get to that GDP figure, it's failure. And then actually when we downsize, people start looking and say, oh, something's wrong with you. You're sick or you're doing bad. So downsizing is bad. And then I learned in economics very soon that more and bigger is better. And then in the Industrial Revolution, this got burned in fire into our DNA. Growth and expansion equal progress equals well-being. And we're seeing results today from science and from different areas of psychology and sociology that this is not holding true anymore. That equation is not, that equality is not holding. And the one thing, I'm a technology geek, so I love technology in all its forms, not only like communication and digital technologies, but I love all technology. However, technology is the biggest enemy of dynamic balance. For technology, trumps dynamic balance because it pushes the frontier of expansion, feeding the illusion that we can live expansively. So it gives us more miles per gallon, more crops per acre, and so forth. And so there's actually no dynamic balance at all. Okay? So if we get this, today, if I'm telling you that one of the contributing factors to living like this is this very pervasive meme, well, today I'm going to say fight fire with fire. So today I'm here going to contaminate you with a different meme. And I'm going to contaminate you with a different meme operating at least at the same level of abstraction. And I'm going to tell you that we live in a universe that is in dynamic balance. We live in a universe that is not only expanding, but it's contracting and expanding into infinity in a harmonic way. And it's the contraction to infinity that feeds the expansion to infinity, and it's the expansion to infinity that feeds the contraction to infinity, and so forth. And so the logic here, and this sounds very romantic, but there's some physics and empirical evidence that the structure of the universe might be such that this dynamic is in place. But the proof of this is that if this were true, then because of fractality, well, we should see manifestations of this dynamic at every scale of resolution. So let's tap into just a couple of examples. Breathing is a manifestation of the expansion and contraction dynamic, and we contract our lungs and we expand and we sustain. We create a sustainable condition by expansion and contraction. And nobody lives only by contracting their lungs. Nobody lives only by expanding their lungs, but it's the play between the two. Let's take another metaphor, day and night. Day as a metaphor for our expansive engagement in the world, okay? And then night as our contractive, coming back, contractive and resting. And as we contract and we rest, what we feed the next cycle of expansion, and the next cycle of expansion feeds into the next cycle of contraction. There are some people that invert both, but nobody lives in an eternal night and nobody lives in an eternal day. But it's a dynamic balance between the two. So, and then again, other manifestation is the creative phenomena. I just told you, divergence, convergence, and how the balance between the two. So what are some of the implications of doing this? And so the first question that comes to mind is, well, is this the end of innovation? And my answer to you is no. It's considering innovation is completely gestalt. It's not only considering expansive innovation, but also accounting for contractive innovation. And accounting for contractive innovation is basically, how do we create space so that we can accommodate newness? Not let us just dump stuff into the market, but let's create space in the market so that we can accommodate newness. Okay? Then another question will be, okay, this is no more buying of the ultimate TED gadget or the trendy new shoes. And the answer is no. It's about mindful consumption. It's about letting go to let end. So next time you're going to buy the shoes, go into your closet, let go of a pair of shoes. Let go in a way that your contraction feeds the expansion of another system, and then you create the space to allow for your newness, and so forth. So the message here is that it's about being able to enjoy a glass of wine every once in a while, without pushing it to the point where we become alcoholic and suffer the extreme regulatory episode, okay? We are alcoholics of growth and expansion, and what we don't realize is that by pushing the system to this path of uncontrolled growth, okay, we build extreme momentum for very violent regulatory episodes, heart attacks, the collapse of our economy, and, well, the fall of the Roman Empire, to name a few. Okay, so what is it that I can do against this prevailing expansion? So what's the action here? What's the call to action here? And I'm going to offer two pieces that might put you in a path of embracing this. First, Adam Smith is one of the greatest system thinkers of all time, and he coined the invisible hand dynamics. He said, every agent, by pursuing their own profit, frequently promote that of society more effectively than if he said to do so. So this is, Adam Smith said, mind your own business and the system will be okay. That's his message. I'm going to reframe this today slightly differently. I'm going to say to you, by pursuing your own dynamic balance, you will effectively pursue that of society more effectively. So what I'm saying is mind your own dynamic balance, not mind your own business. Mind your own dynamic. Start with yourself. Start with very simple things like mindful consumption. Build it into your business models, and so forth. So that's my first piece for engaging in this action. Second piece comes from network theory. And we have much more influence than we account for. Actually, network theory, network science is telling us that each one of you here can influence up to 8,000 people, okay? You can influence 20 people in your first degree of separation, family, friends, etc. 20 people in your second degree of the friends of your friends, and then even you can have influence between the friends of your friends' friends. So if you start minding your own dynamic balance, that's going to spread through the network, and your ideals, your behaviors, all of that's going to spread. All of that is going to sort of contaminate the rest of the system. So this is the invitation to me. I invite you to practice dynamic balance in our everyday life. I invite you to embrace dynamic balance as an essential life skill. How do we go by doing that? Again, mindful consumption. Let go to let in. And as you let go, okay, if you're buying a new dress, let go of an old dress and do it in a way that your contraction is the expansion of another system that has been contracted for a while. Do it mindfully, and then let newness come in. How do you do it with your business model? Again, instead of just putting things into the market, create the space. Maybe you can capture the old product line so you don't saturate the market. You capture it back, then you create the space, and then you create a space that can accommodate that newness. We can do it in product design by building life cycle that accounts for the contraction of a product, and so for the expansion of a product, and then how it contracts back into nature, into our production processes, and so forth. And if we all can do this, then I think that we can start tackling the following issue. Is it possible to pursue development and happiness without uncontrolled physical growth? And in the spirit of TED, I think that that was an idea worth spreading. Thank you very much.